Welcome to the Focus and Chill podcast, where we discuss productivity tactics that work for neurodivergent individuals.
Every episode, we interview guests with lived experience of neurodiversity who also have a solid productivity and habit game, and pass the learnings on to you, our wise and benevolent audience.
We're your hosts, Jeremy and Joey.
I'm Joey, and I coach creatives to get moving on their most ambitious projects through the power of solid habits and strong focus. I'm also a perpetual student of psychology and perpetually on a quest to a one-armed chin-up.
And I'm Jeremy, a neurospicy software developer turned startup founder, building the Focus Bear app to help people with ADHD and autism thrive at work. My cool party trick is leaving parties early so I can get to sleep in time for my 2-hour-long morning routine. The Focus and Chill podcast is brought to you by Focus Bear, a focus enhancement app for ADHDers. That's adults with both combined autism and ADHD. I'm Jeremy, I'm an ADHDer myself. I'm the founder of Focus Bear and also one of the hosts of this podcast. I built Focus Bear for myself originally because I was constantly getting distracted by my phone and my laptop. I wanted a way to tame my ADHD monkey mind so I'd stop going down rabbit holes and actually get work done, but also get off my computer and my phone in the evening so I'd be able to sleep properly. It's working perfectly for me and it's helping a lot of ADHDs as well. I'd love for you to try it. It's available for Mac, Windows, iOS and Android, and it leverages most of the productivity strategies we talk about on the podcast. You can jump onto focusbear.io or just Google Focus Bear and try it out. Let me know what you think. Welcome to episode number 69 of the Focus and Chill podcast. Our guest today is Christa Seals. Christa is a serial entrepreneur from her teen years and has extensive military experience. Christa has always positioned herself as a leader and mentor, consulting high-caliber executives, managing special agent HQs, and scaling her businesses. With her specialized understanding of human nature, team performance, and how high-producing talent operates, Christa is in the unique position to provide team building, performance enhancement, and skill development for high achievers within a demanding industry. Welcome to the show, Christa.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
To begin with, can you tell us about your experience with neurodiversity, beginning with when did you first realize that you weren't neurotypical?
So it kind of happened backwards. I didn't realize until I was an adult, but thinking back to it, I remember being younger and being super intensely interested in certain things. I would go hours. My whole day would just be spent studying and playing violin. Or when I would go camping, I would bring a biology encyclopedia with me and just study animals and plants and science. And it didn't really occur to me that those things were abnormal, these super intense moments of focus, the impulsiveness that I was having, kind of the anxious thoughts. I felt different. But I thought it was just it's just me. And then as I got older, when I was in the military, I had multiple TBIs, traumatic brain injuries, and it really manifested itself. The last one really triggered it the most and caused me to go through a multi-month clinical treatment where I was going through speech therapy, art therapy, vertigo therapy, physical therapy, literally anything you can think of. And one thing that was very difficult for me was to get back into my role as a military intelligence analyst, because you have those intense moments of focus, but at the same time, you have to know how to function normally. So when I would have those moments, it was really great. I performed really well. I was productive. But then when I had trouble concentrating, it would go days without getting anything done. And I was like, something is not right. The gears weren't shifting the same way that they were before, or at least as functional as they were before.
Yeah, that sounds like it would be challenging having the knowledge and the recent experience of being able to do it and then no longer being able to do it. What helped you to move through those experiences?
The therapy definitely helped. Acceptance was a huge part. Understanding that it's okay to not function the same way, even though that was a little bit off. At some point in my high school days, it took a level of acceptance as well, knowing that I had this intense focus, I had the impulsiveness, I had the distractions, stuff like that. So it took a little bit of acceptance back then, but now it was like I was going backwards again. And I'm like, now I have to accept this version of me. Now that it's progressing, now that it had gotten worse. So I think the acceptance was what really drove it to be better.
Yeah, that sounds so important. It's like I've been in situations like that myself where I haven't been able to get things done that I really wanted to get done. And the tendency is to start criticizing myself, which is probably a self-fulfilling cycle there where the criticism and the blame doesn't actually make it better.
Exactly.
Acceptance
Yeah.
is a way better way to deal
Mhm.
with it.
Yeah. And they always say we are our worst critics, but I feel like when you're neurotypical, it's intensified. You're not only your worst critic, but you really tend to put yourself down. You really get onto yourself for having these moments. And I think one of the biggest things we can do for ourselves is give ourselves grace in those moments and understand that, remind ourselves that we know what we're doing. It's just temporary and we'll get through it.
What was it like in the military in terms of stigma around not being neurotypical? Like, I imagine there's a high degree of masking that goes on, and people would not really want to portray themselves being vulnerable.
Honestly, I think it was a mix of the neurotypical and part of my personality of just being a little bit audacious. I took the neurodivergent side of it and I just ran with it because I think in the military, they train you to be very standardized. They want you to be, they try to break you down and rebuild you to who they want you to be. And I was never rebuilt to who they wanted me to be, unfortunately for some leaders, but fortunately for others, because I brought that creative leadership perspective by not being molded to who they wanted me to be, but being molded to who they needed me to be as a leader and as a performer and as an advisor to commanders who needed, in reality, that fresh perspective, not the typical perspective. So I think it really kind of helped in a lot of ways, especially the position that I was in to guide commanders and advise leaders. I wasn't leading them in the normal way that they have heard from everyone else. I was giving them fresh and unique perspective on strategy, on operations, on their own leadership. And it really opened a lot of their eyes, especially some of the commanders had been in for about 30 years. They're about to retire. They extended their retirement even to stay in. And I remember there were so many of them that would just light up when I would come see them because you're different and they like that. And when you add the audacity and the courage to be different, they like that. And I think a lot of executives do.
Yeah, that's interesting. I imagine, yeah, it's great to hear that they did embrace that. Would you have given told them about like the TBIs and some of the reasons why you might think differently, or was it just you showed up in that way and they embraced it?
It's really funny you say that because I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's part of masking or what it is, but I had this thing where I never told my leadership, I never told commanders about any of my health issues at all. I didn't want that to be a factor when it came to my performance because my health issues did not identify who I am. That's not my identity. And so I never brought it up. There was one leader that he was my direct supervisor right before I was retired. And I was very open with him about it because he had very similar problems. And it was only until he told me about what he was going through that I finally opened up to him about it. And it wasn't until my retirement ceremony when I gave my speech, which was a whole thing. I was having nightmares. I couldn't sleep thinking about this speech because I was going through that crisis of like, do I tell them why I'm really getting out? Because I retired at 26, but it was because of the TBIs and my inability to get back to the functioning standard where I could sit there in front of the screen and function 18-hour days in certain environments that were triggering afterwards. But during that speech is when I finally told my entire formation of what happened. And I remember my headquarters commander was in tears at the time. She had no idea. And she came up to me afterwards and she gave me a hug and she's like, "You play it off so well." And that's exactly what you mentioned. I was kind of masking these things. I was playing it off, not only in the fact that I didn't tell them straightforward, but in the fact that I was acting normal. I was internally, it was a nightmare. Outwardly, I'm like, I am going to perform my best as much as I possibly can. I don't want anyone to know about what's going on. I don't want them to think of me differently.
Yeah, I imagine there's some positive aspects of that, avoiding getting into self-limiting beliefs, but there must also have been days where maybe it would have been helpful for people to have known to be able to support you a bit more.
100%. And I thought with myself internally about that all the time. And it might have been a pride thing too. Being in the military as a small female, they automatically label you a certain way. And so when I first went in, I could barely do a single push-up. By year 3, I was outperforming the men in the physical tests. So I had to prove myself one way or another. And on the intellect side, the physical side, everything. And I didn't want to show any weakness in that way.
Well, it sounds like it helped you to level up, but I hope the situations that you're in now are a little bit more accepting of you being your whole self at work as well.
Absolutely. And I embrace it. And it's not something that I'm straightforward about. Like, I don't just tell them, "Oh, I have these differences," but I allow them to see it for themselves because they're going to see the benefits of it in our professional relationship and how it can actually enhance their business.
And on the subject of the professional relationships, Christa, could you tell us a little bit more about what projects you're concentrating on at the moment?
Yeah, of course, I'm working with some of my amazing clients. I always love meeting new clients and digging deep into their world, understanding what their world looks like, and being able to reframe it, bring some innovation, bring some creativity, and really good operation and structure to them. One of the big ones that I'm focusing on right now, my client is an AI developer, and I love AI because I think it's so beneficial. And I think everything he's working on right now is super cool. So I love working on that with them. I'm also working on a TEDx talk and also my book that I've been putting off for so long. So yeah, those are some projects that I've been working on lately.
And can you say a bit more about the TEDx talk, or is that a little bit of a secret?
Yeah, the one that I'm working on is kind of what we've talked about so far. It's abundance through audacity. That's the whole idea, is being audacious, and that's really where change comes in. One of the themes for the TEDx is international or global change. And so my take on that is you experience change at that level through major audacious moves. You can't be a component of change and be afraid. You can't be afraid to take risks. You can't not be bold. Every change maker we think of, thought leader we think of, they've made some ballsy moves. Can I say that?
Yeah, of course.
Profanity is allowed.
Balls away.
Okay. Okay. Basically, you have to have balls of steel to make change at that level. And I've seen it happen before. I've done it before when I was in the military at the division level, making massive change. And when you study these change makers, it's a common theme. And that's how we're going to change things at a global level. That's kind of the idea behind it.
Yeah, I like that. Can you also tell us a bit more about the type of clients that you're working with currently?
So I work with a plethora of clients because business is business is business. You kind of have very similar components. It's like a painting. Every painting has different colors on it, but they're all colors. And so that's how I kind of view businesses. I've worked with dentists, I've worked with AI developer, I've worked with professors that are looking to grow their business to be a professional speaker, be an author. I've worked with all types of, even one of my clients, she quit her 9 to 5 job to start her own salon. And so I'm like, all right, what do we need to do? Here are the components. Here's how you start. Here's your growth track. Here's the phases and how you transition throughout the phases to grow this thing. And so we're looking at her 3, 5, 7, 10-year plan, and she's doing great. I work with all types of amazing clients.
And it's business coaching overall?
Yes, so it's tailored business consulting. So it's anywhere from entrepreneurs that want to start a business. So like my client that quit her 9 to 5 to start her salon. I work with people like her, and I work with people like the AI developer or the dentist that have been in the field for years, and they're just looking for the innovative change. They're looking for the improvement. And sometimes they're even looking for the structure. The dentist actually has been in business for 25 years and never had a single SOP. And so just kind of bringing in simple things like that to get their organization together, to build their teams. It's a major component that a lot of businesses don't think about, because maybe they're like the dentist, maybe they just have their clients because they're referrals and they just operate the same way every time, but they don't have a growth plan. They don't have the new technology. In fact, that doctor was still using paper forms versus electronic forms, which the world has been with for years now. So really getting these businesses up to date with everything, or helping new entrepreneurs start their journey.
Nice. I imagine the military experience would have helped with having structure and SOPs and all of that.
Honestly, it was a game changer, because before the military, I had no idea what an SOP was. I heard the term memo. I didn't get the memo, but I'm like, what's a memo? I don't know. Obviously, my experience, I'm like, oh, okay, this is this, that's that. And it increased my experience like tenfold, that when I got out, I'm like, I know how to do this on the back of my hand. I do this every day. But it's a little bit slower now, and I have to go with a different rhythm, still get it done.
Do you still work 18-hour days these days?
Absolutely not. Obviously, there was some operational stuff that happened, but now I think I've really dialed it in and learned how to be super productive with the time that I want and the time that my clients want.
What do you do when you're not working?
It depends on the day. If it's a full day that I don't have anything going on, I love to explore. I move around a lot because my fiance is still active duty, and we actually just moved to DC. And so I love exploring. Next week, I'm going to go to Union Market and see the different restaurants and stuff up there. I love going to explore hidden gems. So like secret hiking trails, or the views that you see on Pinterest, but no one knows the location to. I love finding those. I love finding hidden gems in places that aren't really tourist attractions, but it's like mind blowing and so inspiring when you get there. That's one of my favorite things to do.
I was going to ask, can you tell us where they are? But that would defeat the point. You'll keep them secret.
Yeah, for a little bit anyways, but I do share a lot of photos, and people get so confused. Like, I lived in a castle the past year, and they're like, where are you living? It's literally an Italian style development. And I had a view of like 2 different towers every morning, floor to ceiling windows. And it's a hidden gem. No one knew about it. I mean, it wasn't marketed very much, but I'm like, I don't know, but it's beautiful, and I'm not telling you until I leave.
Amazing.
So Chris, could you tell us a bit more about what you do to optimize productivity during your working hours?
Yeah, so one of the things that I had to do to calibrate myself after I got out, after I had the head injuries and everything, I had to start self-studying my habits, because the normal things that I would do to optimize my productivity wasn't working anymore. And so one of the first things I remember doing while I was still going through the occupational therapy type thing was I started listening to ASMR. And if I needed to get a super important project done and I had to sit in front of my screen and I didn't feel like sitting in front of my screen, I just put my headphones on and I would just type away for hours on end. And then I would go home and I'm like, oh my God, all this laundry, all this whatever I got to catch up on, put my headphones in, turn on ASMR, boom, it's done quicker than I could even imagine. So once I found out that little secret, I was like, okay, I'm going to start implementing this whenever. And then I started learning new things about how my brain worked. I could not work from home. I had to be somewhere else. So it's funny because when I first got out of the military, I set up like a home office. I'm like, yeah, it'll be great, whatever. It never got used. Even this one that I'm sitting in right now, it will never get used. I'm always at a cafe or somewhere else where I'm not thinking about everything else I have to do. I'm not staring at a wall that I've been wanting to paint for the past 3 weeks. I'm not thinking about everything else. And so after self-studying my habits, that was another thing. I'm like, I can't function inside my home if, I'm trying to get work done. So that was another thing to optimize my productivity was to remove myself.
I've got so many questions and we got so little time. I'd love to know, in terms of the self-study of the habits, I think that's such an important aspect that I think a lot of productivity advice doesn't really cover. Like, you need time to reflect and take stock. How did you cultivate that practice of reflection?
Yeah, so I've always been that person that examines my conscience from a young age. I thought that was very important. And I think that goes back to when I was younger and I was like, I just spent 20 hours practicing my violin. I have this red bruise on my neck that I can't get rid of because I won't put it down. I'm tired because I won't stop reading. Like, what is going on? And so one of the things that I learned younger, and actually I learned it in youth group at church. I went to like 2 or 3 times, and that was one thing I took away was examine your conscience. And it was one thing that I took with me to all the different cultures that I experienced. Every culture has this way of examining your conscience, whether that's praying or meditation or whatever the case is. And so that's when I knew it was important to do. And whenever I was experiencing the differences internally, I decided that I need to do this. I need to examine my conscience. I need to understand what's going on internally in order to move forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for sharing that. Could you tell us about any productivity advice that you found unhelpful?
Absolutely. I think a lot of it's unhelpful actually, because I think we're all such different individuals in that no one's brain functions the same. Whether you're neurotypical or neurodivergent, everyone is still a little bit different. And so one of the really unhelpful ones that I can think of is waking up at 5 a.m. because everyone has their own circadian rhythm. There's the early birds, there's the night owls, and everyone is productive during their own time. Everyone has their peaks and their pits. And you're not always going to have your peak at 5 a.m. You're not if you wake up at 5 a.m. If I wake up at 5 a.m., I am not productive at all throughout the day. And so something that had worked for me was obviously when I was in the military, I had to wake up at a certain time and go to PT and work at a certain time. And that was something that wouldn't quite click. I was never able to function that way. And a lot of people weren't. And so when I realized that time management or timeliness was a problem for me, I'm like, okay, I have to be able to flux a little bit. And whenever I was trying to wake up early and be productive, I realized that my days were just dragging on and I never hit that peak point within those days. But if I allowed myself to sleep in naturally, wake up, I naturally wake up with the sun and I'm wide awake. If I did that, I was able to function at my highest, the most throughout the day, like 4 or 5 hours at a time. And so that was huge for me. So that's definitely an unhelpful productivity tip that's out there.
Yeah, and Krista, we're going to take your advice right now, and it's 9:45 in Australia at the moment, and we're all just going to take a nap. So we'll be right back. Hi there, Focus and Chillers. Are you ready to supercharge your knowledge in the realms of creativity, tech, and psychology? Come check out my fortnightly newsletter. In each edition, you'll get quick wins and actionable takeaways that you can put into practice right away. If this sounds like you, I'd love to have you as a reader. Subscribe for your fortnightly dose of insights. The link is in the show notes. And now, let's get back to the show.
We're back from our nap. We're feeling refreshed. We have dismissed the 5 a.m. myth. I'm keen to hear about how you begin your mornings. You wake up naturally with the sun. What happens next?
Yeah, so it's a little different now than it was before because I had a son and he's 3 now. So it's evolved over time. Now I wake up when the sun comes up, which is different here in DC, by the way. It comes up at like 6 o'clock here, and I'm like, okay, maybe a few more minutes. So I wake up, I get ready first because if I try to get me and my son ready at the same time, it's completely overwhelming. So I hop in a shower to wake up, I get ready, I take my time, hair, makeup, and I have to dress up to feel ready. If I wear sweatpants or anything casual, my mind instantly just like shuts down. It's like, okay, we're chilling today. So I have to dress up and then get my son's stuff ready. And then I get him ready, get his stuff together. I have to grab an emotional support drink for the ride to school. So I grab like a Celsius, like an energy drink or coffee or something, and get him to school. And then my productivity starts. When I drop him off at school, I immediately go to the cafe. I don't come home at all because I will get sidetracked immediately. I get so much work done between the time that he goes to school and the time I get lunch. It's insane. That's my peak hours. And then for my lunch, I will normally just sit down. I force myself to sit down and I'll catch up on some shows or whatever. And then I have like a strict timeline. As soon as I'm done with my food, I turn whatever off and I get back to work for the last chunk. But that's like how my morning goes to, I start slow. I think Jeff Bezos said the other day he putters in the morning, just does whatever, and his first meeting's at 10. That's kind of where I'm at.
Where do you fit the self-study in? Is that more in the evening?
Yeah, so it's weird. I have these certain inspirational times, and that's when I really self-study. Awkwardly enough, one of them is in the shower. That's when I really get inspiration. I really have deep thought. But then the other one is when I'm driving, which is dangerous. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's when I'm driving. And so sometimes I'll have my notes pulled up on my phone and I'll do my voice notes or whatever. And I just kind of brain dump whatever it is. And then, of course, at night when I'm trying to sleep and everything is coming to mind. But self-study normally happens in those moments of the deep inspirational thoughts that are just coming to me.
It's interesting, the lunchtime. Have you ever experimented with not watching a show during that time? Because for me, often that's the time where I'll have those ideas that come in as well. If my hands are busy with the fork and my mind is able to go off in tangential directions.
Yes, so I have tried it before, but I think with the intensity that I'm experiencing in the morning after drop off, and then the intensity after lunch, I think that's just a good enough balance to where lunchtime is really the only time where I can like calm my brain and just turn it off. Because other than that, it's when I'm driving, sleeping, and in the shower where my brain's just going, going, going. And so one thing that I realized is I've tried to work through lunch before. I've tried even when I was in the military, and it was becoming like a toxic habit of mine. If I wasn't taking that little bit of time to just shut down, but then more importantly is cutting myself off as well, because I do get deep into shows, especially like true crime or trash TV. I will be all in, but once I'm done, like my last bite, done chewing, turn it off immediately. I get back to it. I'll usually grab another emotional support drink and I'll either another coffee or another whatever. And that's my cue to get back in the zone. but I have tried that before.
That's impressive. I don't think I'd be able to stop myself if I was halfway through a show.
Yes. It honestly took a lot of discipline. And even today, honestly, I took that time and I ended up binge watching 8 hours of true crime. But I gave myself grace. Remember, I'm like, yesterday was a super productive day. Tomorrow's gonna be a super productive day. Today, not so much, but we accept it. Still
Yeah.
got some emails sent out.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of the concept of an emotional support drink before. What makes it supportive for you? Is it, I imagine with a coffee, it's warm. I often find that if I have a nice cup of tea, that it does make me feel a little bit soothed. But an energy
Yeah.
drink, is that it's a different type of emotional support?
So it depends on the situation. So it's weird. And it's one of those things where I'm like, remember, we're all kind of functioning in our own unique ways, right? Okay, so if I'm in a meeting, I have a warm cup of coffee. If I'm needing brain function, I'll have an energy drink, but I have like Alani or Celsius where it's just like a ton of vitamins that give you the energy. So I'm okay with that. But I don't drink like monsters or anything with all the other additives. But I use that if I'm like working on something. I think it's more of the habit of sipping the drink more than it is the actual drink. If I'm driving and I don't have something to sip on, I'll be thinking about that the whole time. But if I have something to sip on, then I can float away into my little thoughts while I'm successfully driving to wherever I'm going.
Yeah, I like the idea of the emotional support drink. It sounds nice, like an emotional support animal that you carry around.
Yes,
It's the drink becomes your companion.
exactly.
You were mentioning before that you have you kind of ramp up your morning to the right energy level rather than waking up and being like snap into it. I'm curious about your sleep and like, do you have a wind down routine in order to get into the right state to have quality sleep?
Yeah, so part of the self-study thing again is I tried a few different things. I've tried yoga before bed, I've tried working out before bed, I've tried so many different things, even hot tea, whatever it is. And the thing for me is I listen to ASMR if I need a good night's sleep. If I feel like I've been functioning a lot throughout the day and my brain is just like kaput, then I will just naturally fall asleep. I try to naturally let myself fall asleep if I can. But if I find that my mind is still racing, or if I have just that natural flow of creative ideas or all these random thoughts that won't leave, I will jot them down. I will put them in my notes on my phone. I will get it out of my head and just like brain dump it somewhere that's going to be effective later. Because I don't want to get rid of the creative thoughts. I don't want to try to suppress them, but I need to get them out of my head so I can sleep. And so ASMR and brain dumping is huge for me. It's really effective.
I've heard ASMR on the Huberman podcast, I'm sure, and I don't actually know what it stands for. Could you fill us in on, if you don't know what it stands for, that's fine, but what is it actually like? Is it the humming style binaural beats?
Well, everyone is kind of different. They have different triggers. For me, when I was younger, I didn't realize it was ASMR, but my grandmother, she used to bring all of my cousins into her bedroom and we'd all be laying on her bed and she would say the rosary to us. And she would have her little beads and she would just be like humming, kind of like, blah, 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 underneath her breath. And she would be saying the rosary, but it was so relaxing to us. We would beg her to just talk at a low voice and play with her beads so we could all fall asleep. And so later, whenever I forget how I discovered it. I was still in the military. I was going through the therapy at the time for the brain injuries. And I remember my coworker typing and fiddling with papers and just doing the most mundane things. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just got so much work done by focusing on that, by listening to that, and just an immense amount of work done. And it was strange. And so I'm like, let me look into this. So that's when I discovered ASMR and I messed around with a few different sounds. I really enjoyed like watching people paint, like the painting sounds of the brush. Another one that really works for me now is different, but it's like makeup rummaging bags or colored pencil rummaging type thing. And it brings me back to my grandmother. She used to work for Jafra, and she would rummage through her makeup and she would talk about it. And she'd be like, oh, this is weird. Like, I haven't seen this in a while, put it away. ASMR, I forget what it stands for. It's like the audio sensory something. I don't know
We'll
if you
Google
guys
it afterwards and put it into the show
yeah.
notes.
Yes. So it took a little bit of experimenting. And even now, it's weird. I'll click through different videos, and sometimes things that normally work for me to numb my brain and just allow me to turn off, sometimes it doesn't work for me. So sometimes I'll have to scroll through YouTube and be like, okay, what's going to help me tonight? And so I have a few favorite channels that I listen to, but sometimes it just doesn't work enough. Sometimes I end up listening to it longer, but it's been a huge help. I didn't know it was for like ADHD and ADD and just stuff like that. I didn't know it was for that specifically until a few months ago, actually. A lot of people use it.
Yeah, I really like ocean sounds, and sometimes violin music as well is good for me.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Ocean sounds, I think they have like the different noises, like the white noise, pink noise, brown noise. Yeah, I'm not sure if, I don't know if those are like ASMR type things or what kind of things those are, but I have found like white noise helpful in some situations.
All right, I'm going to try it today while I work. Let's wrap things up by just hearing where people can connect with you. Where's the best place for people to find your work?
Yeah, so a lot of my clients, well, a lot of people know me personally, but if they don't, they discover me on Instagram. And my Instagram is just at Christa Seals. And then I also have my website, which is, I know, very unique, christaseals.com. And so that's how I typically connect with people that aren't in person.
Well, Chris, it's been wonderful having you on. Do you have any final asks or words for our audience?
Yeah, definitely. I just want to say the early bird is no more productive than the night owl. We all function differently. Self-study as much as you can because it's going to be life-changing. Once you start to understand yourself, you can use that to your advantage. So it doesn't feel like a liability anymore. Your brain feels like an asset.
Wonderful. And we'll wrap the show with that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Focus and Chill podcast. To listen to other episodes, jump onto podcast.focusbear.io. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or you know someone who'd be a good fit, email us at team@focusbear.io. Otherwise, stay focused, stay chilled, and peace out.